What's up guys, my name's James. I'm an Airbnb expert, the author of the upcoming Airbnb for Dummies, and I want to talk to you in today's video about a company called Sonder. If you haven't heard of them already, they're a company, a billion-dollar company, at least they were valued at that. I don't know if they're worth that quite now at this stage, but they're a company in the short-term rental Airbnb economy, like a lot of us are, but they're a big player in the rental arbitrage space. And so for those of you who aren't familiar, it basically means you're just securing a lease on a property with the ability to sublet that property, you're furnishing it, you're setting it all up, and then you're flipping it onto short-term rental platforms like Airbnb to make a profit. Now, Sonder specifically, and then other companies that are quite similar to them, like for example, Lyric, that was just recently largely invested in by Airbnb. They bought a large portion of the company. They are fast-growing companies in this space. So they have lots of properties, and for years now, they've been growing very, very quickly. And so it's no surprise that they didn't have a lot of cash on hand when all this craziness hit, because like I've discussed in other videos, having a business that you're constantly having to reinvest your profit, reinvest your earnings into additional properties. Every time you want to bring on a property, you're paying first and last month's rent, you're paying for furniture. In Sonder's case, I know a lot of properties that they would bring on, they would often do renovations on the properties. They would really go the extra mile to bring the property up to speed. They're signing those long-term leases. And then obviously with a company that's as large as Sonder or as large as Lyric, they also have additional overhead for their staff, for their employees, their team. Right? And so the challenge with it is that those companies, like for example, Sonder is one of the fastest growing companies in the space, if not the fastest growing company in the space. They're one of the few companies in this space that has reached the unicorn status of being valued at $1 billion or more, right? And the way that they achieved that was by investing heavily into growth. Right? They don't achieve that kind of growth without investing heavily into it, because that's just not the nature of the business. It's not a business model that spits off a whole bunch of cash flow while growing. It is a business that spits off good cash flow when it's stabilized, when it's reached a point of stability where now we're not going to go and heavily grow the business. We're not going to go and keep on reinvesting into more and more properties, more and more units. But in that growth period, it's not earning a whole bunch of cash. It's, the cash is going back into growing the business. And so the challenge with that is that as soon as something like this hits, as soon as something like the whole, big crisis that we're going through in the world right now hits and tourism tanks down to a low, well, suddenly they're left kind of high and dry. They're sort of holding the bag, so to speak. And so now Sonder has to cut 1/3 of its staff. And similarly, Lyric, another company that I mentioned here in the space, they had to cut about 20% of their staff due to everything that's happened. And with both companies, it's pretty reasonable to expect that they're going to have even further cuts to their businesses. Right? And so now they're going to be backtracking. They're laying off a whole bunch of employees. They're laying off a huge portion of their team. And it's quite likely that they're going to start having to cut a bunch of their leases. And so they're going to have backwards growth on their company overall. And that's simply because they just didn't have the cash on hand to support themselves through what's going on in the world right now. Again, that's pretty understandable given the rate at which they were growing, because with this type of a business, you cannot have both. You cannot have cash on hand. You cannot have cash that's either, for a smaller operator earning you just income that you're living off of, or for a bigger company like Sonder that is going away into the war chest, into your financial reserves to save up for a bad scenario like this, and have this massive growth. You have to have one or the other. Each one is a sacrifice that you have to make. And so for the average person who's just looking to start a reasonable sized business, they're not looking to create some kind of unicorn company the way that Sonder has, and they're just looking to make a good income for themselves, for their family, maybe even just a side income. Having a business like Sonder's, having that type of a business model where you're constantly reinvesting your profit to grow is very, very far less than ideal, because with that type of business model, you're going to be 6 months, 12 months, maybe even longer before you start getting any kind of a reasonable cash flow. When you want to start increasing that cash flow, you want to start increasing the amount of money that you're earning, you have to make a sacrifice for a period of time. You have to take a short-term loss in order to get a long-term gain. And I've discussed in other videos as well that doing that comes with some inherent risks, because if while you're going through that growth period, a city that just happens to regulate against Airbnb or short-term rentals, or something else happens that jeopardizes your business, like for example, this pandemic that we're going through right now, well, suddenly you're left holding the bag. Suddenly you're left high and dry, and now for that period where you've been sacrificing for 12 months here because of the future payoff you're going to get, Now that future payoff is cut out at the knees. So you don't get that. You've just been building for essentially nothing for 6 months, 12 months, however long. So for the average person, it doesn't really make sense to pursue that kind of a business model. What makes a lot more sense is to use a business model where you're going to have you're going to have consistent monthly cash flow coming off in the business that you don't need to reinvest into growing it. That you can grow at a reasonable rate without putting up a whole bunch of your money and without a bunch of investment. Because in most cases, in my opinion at least, this is just my perspective on business, is that you want to have your investments and you want to have your business, and you want to, in some cases, invest in your business, but you don't necessarily want to have to invest in your business continually to keep growing it. Being able to grow your business organically through sweat equity, through your own hard work, your own labor, is a much better alternative when you're starting that business out. Sure, once you get to a point where your livelihood is taken care of, we're at a stage where you're thinking about going to that next level, getting to 7 figures, getting to 8 figures, that's when using your finances as leverage can be very beneficial, because your finances can help to propel you a lot more quickly than your sweat equity can. But when you're first getting started, you don't have the luxury of having a whole bunch of money. You have the luxury of having likely some time set aside that you can invest, and so it's much more advantageous to go and take that time that you do have and that you aren't afraid about losing that time. You know, maybe you waste a bunch of time, but that's a whole lot better than putting yourself financially behind, because let's remind ourselves, we spent time to earn that money. So then to waste that money, there's a whole lot more headache that comes along with that than if we put a couple months worth of effort into something and it doesn't quite pan out. So in my opinion, it's a lot better to start building based on sweat equity, based on just putting in the work and not pursue a business model that you need to put a whole bunch of money into right out of the gate. And so to do that, when it comes to Airbnb, it looks like running a co-hosting business where you're managing properties in exchange for a percentage of the overall revenue. And the nice benefit of this is that, in my opinion, it's a business that has a lot more longevity to it as well, because you are solving a substantial problem for your property owners. You know, the property owners that you're working with, you're providing a value-added service to them, so there's more longevity in that. And people would argue that rental arbitrage does provide value, and I think to an extent it does. In my opinion, though, the value that you're providing is a little bit more, you're providing value by paying people. So you're just paying people to provide value, a little bit more so than the service you're actually providing. You're more providing value to guests, and I guess you could kind of argue that either way, but it's irrefutable that when you run a short-term rental accommodation, you're running a management fee business, you are providing a massively beneficial service to the property owners you work with. At the end of the day, you're managing the bookings, you're managing the pricing, you're managing the guest communication, you're managing the organizing and cleaning teams, you're taking care of all of that, taking that off of the property owner's plate. So it's a very valuable service, hence why people are willing to pay 20 to 30% in some cases for that service. And so as you grow as a business, you're not, as the business owner, needing to constantly keep reinvesting into that business, which is another big benefit to it. You can grow a lot more quickly, you can grow without investing your own capital, and you don't have this looming risk over your head, because you're not spending these periods working and building your business without actually seeing any income coming in, and then suddenly have the risk of getting shut down by city regulation or by a virus or something like that. That can also happen, but you wouldn't have been building in the meantime for free. You wouldn't have been working without earning income in the interim there. And so you're not deferring all your income to a later date in the future that may not come. You're earning income, and just like any business, you run the risk of running into challenges, but in the meantime, you would have still been earning income. So for those reasons, I personally think that the co-hosting, the management fee model is a much better fit for the average person in terms of running a business that is a good lifestyle business and actually supports your livelihood. Now, other people will disagree. If you do have other thoughts, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I'll go ahead and read the comments. I'd love to hear from you on what your thoughts are, whether you think I'm right, whether you think I'm absolutely insane and I'm wrong and I'm missing a big picture. I'd love to hear about it. If you like this video, if you got value from it, if you like the way that it was organized, please just do take the time to give it a quick thumbs up. Just hit that like button, give it a quick like. It really does help me out tremendously with the YouTube algorithm. So if you could take a second to do that, I would really appreciate it. If you're new to the channel here and you want to get more great content around Airbnb, Airbnb, around the co-hosting and the management fee model, and just how to perform well on Airbnb in general and how to get going, then go ahead and give the channel a subscribe. Also, I'm gonna leave a link in the description here to a free training that I have that teaches you step by step exactly how I was able to build my co-hosting business. I actually started doing rental arbitrage and learned the hard way that it wasn't a great model for me, and that's why I transitioned over to co-hosting. Now, I had some success in the rental arbitrage model, but I just found that it was gonna be too risky to continue growing at the pace that I wanted to grow at, and so that's why I transitioned over to co-hosting. If you wanna hear all about that and you wanna hear the step-by-step strategy that I used, everything, all that, and get some cool free tools to help you out in growing your business, then just click the link in the description below. That'll give you access to a completely free training, some free tools to help you get started. So check that out if you're interested, and otherwise I will see you in the next video.